Welcome back to the blog. I missed you guys last week. I was down in San Diego visiting my daughter, taking care of some issues. I did have some time to stop and play at the 7 Mile Casino. Ran into 3 or 4 vlog supporters and enjoyed talking with them and getting to meet them. Anyway, didn't get any footage from there because they don't allow vlogging, but we did book a small win in the 5-5 game. I am also announcing that I am quitting the 5K challenge. Ever since I implemented it, I think I've been reaching for wins instead of just playing poker, and it's screwed up my game. Haven't had the greatest performance. I think in the last 2 months I won basically $2,000, which is better than losing, but still not up to snuff. I'm not going to be pressuring myself to do that anymore. Whatever comes, comes, and whatever I win, I win. And hopefully we can make a strong finish to the rest of the year. This first hand happened at the first of the month, and it's the only hand I took from this day because it was just the most interesting hand, and everything else was pretty much really, really boring. Anyway, I'm on the button, and I have ace-queen offsuit. There are a bunch of limpers, and I ended up raising it to 20. As you can see from the graphics, I'm up about $140 at this point, winning a bunch of small pots. The small blind and big blind called the $20. The player under the gun, he's a fairly decent player. He ends up calling also. I was trying to narrow his range down. Basically a lot of suited connectors, a lot of small pocket pairs that he would limp from under the gun with. The other players call, and we go 5 ways to a flop that comes out. Ace 4 deuce rainbow. Pretty good flop for my hand. First player checks. The big blind, who has a very short stack, leads for $25. The other gun player thinks for a little bit and decides to make the call. He could have some sort of ace at this point. Player in the middle of the table, he also likes his hand. He puts in the 25. All right, at this point, I'm really starting to wonder what the heck is going on. The player in the big blind, I'm pretty sure has an ace. The player who called the last 25, he probably has an ace. It looks like the player behind me in the small blind wants to call also. So I'm thinking the guy under the gun probably doesn't have an ace. And since the only kind of hands I really put him on are pocket pairs, I'm thinking he might have flopped a set. I actually considered just letting this go at this point, but I thought $25 would be too cheap to do that. So I got to go ahead and put a call in. Maybe these other 2 players are just really out of line. Turn card comes as a jack of clubs. It completes the rainbow. The big blind now goes all in for $31. At this point, if I think the player in the under the gun position had a set or 2 pair of some sort, like ace 4 or ace deuce suited, they would put in a raise. And sure enough, after some thought, he does decide to put in a raise, and he makes it $83. I was thinking about the sizing quite a lot at this point, because if he had a hand that was susceptible to being counterfeited, like say ace deuce or ace 4, I think he would have gone larger. So I'm really thinking that he has a set, and I'm not sure whether he would even limp in with pocket deuces here, but pocket 4s I think is definitely in his range. The player to my right, he goes ahead and puts in the call. He probably has an ace himself. All the aces are gone. I got 1 pair with a good kicker, but in a horrible spot. So I just decided to let it go. I'm sure you guys are wondering exactly what this guy has, so I kept the camera rolling just so you can find out. Anyway, the dealer figures out a little side pot issue. The all-in was very short, and the guy put in a small raise to build a side pot. Once that's all figured out, the dealer ended up turning and burning and putting up a 6 of diamonds, which is a complete blank. Now the player in the middle of the table has been calling off fairly loose all day long, so I expect this under the gun player to put in a large bet. I was thinking maybe somewhere around half pot, so I would have bet like $200. After some thought, he got a little bit greedier than I would have got, and he bets $250. all within the range of this player putting in a call if he has a ace, and he'd definitely be calling if he had two pair. Anyway, he decides to finally fold his hand. Player shows that he had pocket fours for a set of fours. So save some money on this one. Player to my right opens for $12. I got a suited one gapper. It's very questionable to play in middle position. I decided to go ahead and make the call for the $12. And we get three other players joining us. So we go 5 ways to a flop with 61 in. Comes king, queen, 4, rainbow, no diamonds. We have a backdoor straight draw. That's about it. We are definitely giving up. We feel like we just wasted $12. But once it gets checked around, my chances are much, much better because I can actually catch maybe a 6 and pick up a straight draw. But that's not what happens. We get the 7 of clubs. So we make a pair of 7s. That's not bad. It beats a pair of 4s. Anyway, definitely not going to be betting this, of course. Of course, I check it. The player in the hijack now bets for $40. Now, what could he be betting? Most likely a pair of queens, maybe some sort of flush draw. But anyway, it seems like a very weak bet to me. And I think this is a good opportunity to try to take the pot away from somebody. The other two players fold out, which is good. And it comes back to me. I could have easily been checking a hand like a strong king, maybe 2 pair. I'm going to go for it. I'm going to put it in the check raise, make it 140. As I said, I think the best he can have is like a pair of queens. If he has a queen with a flush draw, he might look me up. But other than that, I think he's going to fold out 90% of all his hands. After some thought, he does decide to let it go. So we end up stealing this small pot and winning our first hand of the day. We're in the big blind with ace-3 suited. There's a raise in 4 players. So I call. We go 5 ways, 75 in the flop. Comes the ace, queen, 8. So I got a top pair, backdoor flush draw, and a weak kicker. I check it. It does get checked around, which is good. Turn card comes as bad. It's a 9 of spades. Puts up straight potentials, a lot of 2-pair potentials. I check it. Player at the end of the table in the low jack decides to put in a small wager of $30. Player on the button, he thinks for a little bit before calling. Don't think he has too much. If he had a straight or better or 2-pair or better, I think he would have raised. I might be good here, but it's definitely not my favorite situation. Hoping just to get the showdown. The other players end up folding out, so it's just the 3 of us, and we see a river card of a 5 of diamonds. That's a pretty good river card. I check it, hoping it gets checked around. It does. I turn over my weak ace, and it is good. So we get a little bonus one from the big blind. The hijack opens for a raise to 15. I'm on the button. I have ace-8 suited. I use this to isolate my opponent. He can be opening with a fairly wide range from that position. Ace-8 is most likely ahead of him, and plus I have position, and plus I think I have a decent read on player. So we go heads up to a flop of 9, 6, 5, 2 spades, 1 diamond. So I got a gutter, I got a backdoor flush draw, and I have an ace. He checks it over. I'm going to bet this one for $30, a little bit of a down bet. Seeing what he does. He doesn't seem like he's too comfortable with his hand, but $30 seems awfully cheap. So I think he's going to go ahead and put in the call at this point. And if a blank comes, I'm just going to go ahead and take the pot away. And if I hit my straight, that'd be great. If I hit an ace, I'll probably end up checking it back if he checks to me because he might have a stronger ace than I do. Anyway, 5 of hearts comes on the turn. Shouldn't really help him at all. So I'm going to go ahead and put in a decent sized bet here. I go for $75. I think I'll get him to fold all his ace highs that are better than mine. All those king queens, all that stuff. So we win another little one. There's a $6 straddle, 3 limpers. I looked down at pocket jacks from the small blind, decided to make it $40. I thought this would be large enough to get most of the players out, and it was, because we only get one player from the original straddler. Everyone else ends up folding out. So it's just going to be the two of us seeing the flop. Hopefully we can flop something decent. Looking for, say, a 10 high flop. Well, we get a ace king flop with 2 hearts. Not ideal. I'm going to go ahead and put out a continuation bet here for $25. He could have a lot of hands like, Queen 10, Jack 10, pocket 5s, all sorts of stuff that he would instantly fold. Once he puts in the call, I figure I'm up against at least an ace or a king or some sort of flush draw. So when the 9 of hearts comes on the turn, I think it's just wiser just to check, see if we can get to see a cheap river card. He's not going to let us see a cheap river card. He is going to go ahead and bet, and after some thought, he makes it $85. Now, there's a good chance he has an ace or a king. He might even have a flush at this point. Maybe my jack of hearts is good as a flush draw. But the fact that there's an ace of clubs out there and he could be sitting there with a ace of hearts in his hand and have me totally crush. I'll be drawing to 2 outs if he doesn't have a flush and maybe 0 outs if he does. So I think it's just going to have to let this one go. Not ideal, of course, because we have a decent flush draw, but it's going to get us in trouble. So I just dump it. There's a $6 straddle in this hand. I look down at ace queen offsuit from middle position. I make it $25 to go. Everyone folds out except for the player who's under the gun who put in the straddle. He seems to like his hand, so he makes it 75. Now, this person hasn't 3-bet very much, and I think he has a very strong hand. I probably should just fold this, to be honest with you. I think that his range is so strong. A lot of pocket kings in his range when I have ace queen. Anyway, the flop comes 5-5-3 rainbow. We have absolutely nothing. And if he has a big pair, I expect him to bet. And since he is sort of a newer player, I expect him to bet big. And he bets a pot size bet of $150, trying to protect his big pair. Of course, this would have worked just fine with a much smaller bet because, I'm not going to be chasing him. It's time to give it up, lose another one. I'm in the big blind and I get a free look at a flop with Jack deuce of diamonds. And the flop comes out 10-7-6 with 2 diamonds. I flop a flush draw. I put out a c-bet of $10. I instantly get raised from the player on my left to 25. This seems like a lot like a good one pair, say like ace 10, trying to limit the field. And since there's a straight draw out there, I'm going to go ahead and re-hit it. Put a lot of pressure on those one pair isolation plays. They end up folding, and we win one without making our hand. Well, we got a couple limpers. I'm in the cutoff with king queen offsuit, raised to $20. I end up getting 2 callers for the $20. So just the 3 of us are going to see the flop, which comes out king high with 2 diamonds. Not a bad flop. They both check to me. I'm going to go for about half pot bet here since there is a flush draw out there. First player folds, next player double checks their cards, making sure they have what they think they have, and decide to put in the call. Turn card comes as a deuce of diamonds, not the greatest. If he had a flush draw, he got there. I decided to check this back, be a little cautious, and of course a 5 of diamonds comes on the river. I'm pretty sure he has a flush at this point, and he makes a small bet trying to get some small amount of value out of me. And of course, I just puke and throw my hand away. Well, it looks like I'm going to be able to get some revenge because I got the same hand exactly 1 round later, except the suits are switched. I have the king of clubs instead of the king of hearts this time. Get a couple limpers. I raised to 20. This time I get 3 callers. So there's going to be $84 in the pot. And we're going to go see a flop, which comes out 6-3-3 with 2 hearts. Not the greatest flop in the world for King Queen offsuit, but when they all check to me, I'm going to go ahead and make a half-size pot bet because this really shouldn't hit their range at all. I might get called by a pocket pair, I might get called by a flush draw, and I might get called by nobody. Well, the game is quieted down quite a bit. It's a pretty boring game. I'm in the big blind with 4-3 suited. It gets called and I get a free look at a flop. Flop comes out 10-9-3 with 1 heart, 2 diamonds. I got bottom pair and a backdoor flush draw. I check it. It gets checked around. Turn card is interesting. It's a 2 of hearts. I pick up a flush draw. I decide to stab at this with a $20 bet. I get a quick call from the player on my left. The others fold out. So what do I think the player on my left has? I think he's more likely to have a draw than a pair at this point. People usually don't call pot-sized bets with 1 pair, but they do call it with straight draws, flush draws, and there are mass opportunities for straight and flush draws with 2 hearts and 2 diamonds on the board and a 9-10 and a 3 deuce out there. I actually thought that a flush card would be one of my outs when I first bet this for $20. Now I'm not so sure. So I'm not hoping to hit my flush. I'm either hoping to hit, no, I'm just hoping to hit nothing. And I can probably bluff him out of this pot. River card comes as a 9 of spades. That's a good enough card for me to bluff. All those draws miss. So I'm going to go ahead and bet. And as soon as I start putting chips in, he mucks his hand. Overall, it was a very quiet week over at Capital Casino for me. I was card dead most of the time. This last session was probably the most active I've been all week long. And as you can see, I didn't have very many big hands to play. A lot of small, junky hands that managed to win some small, junky pots with. There are a couple different ways you could run bad in life or in poker, let's just say. And one of them is like you get a lot of big hands, you get them in good situations, and you just get them cracked. The other way is just like getting a lot of mediocre hands that you get roped in on and just get ironed out. For me, it's finding very long sessions where you have absolutely nothing playable and you're just bleeding money slowly. It's like a Chinese water torture where there's just a drip, drip, drip all day long. It just, it takes more out of me than anything else. But I hope you guys found something valuable from this vlog. That ace-queen hand, a big lesson to be learned there. When you have a board that dry, there's a possible straight, but no one should be in there with a 5-3. But when you have a situation like that and you have people betting and calling, and you have more people betting and calling than possible aces available, because that's the obvious hand that people would have in that situation, you're going to run into someone with a set, especially if they're limping under the gun. They're a pretty decent player. A lot of people would limp with small pocket pairs. So anyway, keep that in mind in your game. Until next time, good luck at the tables, and we'll see you back here soon.